Welcome to the Virtual Excellence Show. I'm Ross Dawson, and this is our weekly interview with amazing people. And coming up very soon, we have an interview with Terri Griffith, with extraordinary insights into the connected world. So just introduce the show. We are trying to build a community, so please do go to the website, the vx.show, where we're building not just all of the recordings, but also new resources and other ways to interact and participate. Use the hashtag on Twitter, #VXShow. And we've also got a Facebook group where you can join in the conversation and with some other smart people. And if you're not watching this live, this is at the same time every week. So please get on. And that's when each show comes out, and we'll have some live interaction at the time. So we have now the wonderful pleasure of Terri Griffith on the show. So Terri, you've known for a long time, involved in similar spaces. She's been a professor of management, innovation, and entrepreneurship at a number of leading universities, author of, amongst others, The Plugged-In Manager, which I think really goes to the themes of the show, and very well known as a author, writer, speaker, and very importantly, educator. So please welcome Terri Griffith.
Thank you so much, Ross. It's a pleasure to join you.
Fantastic. So I guess the usual starting point is observing that the world has changed recently, and we have been forced to not necessarily work in the same places, more and more virtually. So this is something you've been looking at for a very, very long time, in how, I suppose, connected or plugged in, as you mentioned, described, organizations work. So what have your observations been over the last month as some organizations have transitioned and others have struggled with it?
Yeah, that dynamic is so important to realize. In the beginning, I even wrote a post where I said, this isn't remote. And I think I was speaking specifically about online learning, online education. I go, that's not what this is. This is a cough. This is a crisis online format. And in those early weeks, that's the best we could really have hoped for, especially for the organizations that hadn't been so involved in remote in the past. And now that we're several months into it, it is interesting to watch the organizations that are thoughtfully applying I'll talk about a negotiated approach, that they're thinking about their different stakeholders and thinking about how to bring the different dynamics of remote work to bear and to do it effectively. That said, still, I don't think I had ever realized just how fortunate some of us are in terms of when we're doing remote work. We maybe are doing it, with great doing it in an environment, but other people still, due to the COVID crisis, are not in any kind of an ideal environment. And so even though some organizations have been very thoughtful about the moves that they've made, and some employees and other kinds of workers have been very thoughtful about how they've adjusted their work strategies, it still isn't a normal environment in any way, shape, or form. And I always try and remember that and reflect on, the different family situations, the different housing situations that people are having to deal with as they try and craft their work to continue on for the long term.
So we were just chatting before about how some people are saying that remote work is not working very well, and which is, I suppose, an observation, but I don't think that necessarily means that remote work doesn't have a future.
Exactly. And I always look at these, the morning newspapers, as all the blog posts are coming out every day about who's going to say this isn't ever going to work out and we're all going to come back into the office. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think we are going to be dramatically more remote going forward than we were in the past. And it will be because people have seen the benefits. They'll also have seen the costs, but they maybe have figured out how to overcome those costs as they go. And the part that I guess aggravates me a little bit is when someone writes a headline that says remote isn't working. they aren't acknowledging that we've had, if I want to push hard on it, thousands of years of learning how to work face to face. And now in just a few short months to expect that same kind of quality dynamic, it's not realistic. So we're going to have to be far more proactive to make these transitions into remote work and make them be effective. Or we're just going to have to acknowledge that it'll take us a while to figure out how to do this right. And these are still at the experimental stage, and I think people should cut themselves some slack, cut their organizations some slack, both directions. Managers and the people doing the work in the organization, and acknowledge that we're still coming to terms about how to do this in this particular time. And thank you so much for, the nice comments about the book, The Plugged In Manager. There I talk about people, technology, and organizational process. And, over the years since that book, I've kind of moved to what I call a thinking in 5T, or a 5T approach, where I have people start with, what's your target? First T. How about your talent? What skills, knowledge, skills, ability are they bringing to the process? What techniques are you going to have? What technology tools do you have? And then acknowledging the times that you're working in. And certainly the times, that's the overarching context piece right now, is the shutdown process and working from home in a new environment. But that 5T approach, all those different dimensions we need to consider to make this work out well. So it's not just that we can say, well, today I'm going to work at home, tomorrow I'm going to be back in the office, all I need is a laptop. That isn't it. It's the complete dynamics around the team and how the workflow is going to happen. And all of that will be better to the extent that we negotiate it. So if we think about the stakeholders, in terms of our colleagues, the people who maybe will use the work that we contribute, as well as managers and the organization stakeholders more broadly. But if we think about that as more of a negotiated thing, I think we're better off. And I'll kind of go with my little tidbit. We see in 3D, we need to think in 5T, knowing that's not kind of a natural thing, but also, and I've got a prop here that I like to demo a little bit. If you think about an organization or the work that you're trying to do as being a component of 5 or more different dimensions, you can't really pull on any one and think that that's going to work out. It just doesn't budge. But if you let other things kind of go along with it, so if I'm going to make a transition to remote, then am I also going to change, how often I talk to my team members in a formal way, or how often I talk to them in an informal way, or how do we track work progress? Is it focusing on the results, or is it focusing on how many Zoom calls I was on? And I'm going to hope that it was on the results, but that may be different, and that may be things that we need to manage. So we want to be effective at this.
That's fantastic, Terri. I mean, I was going to ask you both for your, distilled insights on how managers should approach, the current situation, and also from insights from your plugged-in manager, and you've already sort of pulled those together. So this, when in my Humans in the Future of Work framework, I talk about work design, and the idea we need to say, all right, well, the work is different, so how do we design that in a different way? But are there any distilled insights, I suppose, or advice for those organizations which are relatively early on the journey? I mean, considering those 5 T's, is every organization different, or there are things where they should start in thinking about how to be better at being by necessity, a virtual organization?
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that we can all agree is going to be required for these organizations is we need to be more explicit about the work that we're doing. We can't rely on somebody just being able to look over across their desk and see what we're getting done. That we may have to do more of our work out loud, which is an idea other people have certainly talked about in the past. But as we do that work out loud, what great opportunities And this is something we wouldn't have perhaps had in the past. But as I'm working out loud, maybe I see some other way I can help one of my teammates or one of my colleagues, or they see a way that they could help me, or we all come together and we say, well, if we had this different tool or approach to our process, maybe things could be better. So being more explicit, and I think that's something, even just in virtual communication, we can do a better job at. But being very explicit in our communication, explicit about our expectations, thoughtful about what we actually need done, kind of prioritizing that. And sometimes, if I think about a Zoom meeting, in some regards, Zoom meetings actually are giving us more than that face-to-face meeting, because we do have a legitimate access to the chat. We do have the ability to easily share files as we're sitting there. And maybe in some ways those are, effective tools that we should have been using even in a face-to-face environment. But kind of thinking about that and saying, how can I do my work differently in this new environment? And perhaps it ends up in some regards even being better. Explicit communication is good for face-to-face meetings. Explicit communication is good in virtual settings. And working out loud has benefits regardless of the context you're in. So I guess I'd put a stake in the ground and say, working out loud, being more explicit is something every organization, no matter their context, could draw on and gain benefits.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I'd like to come back to that in a little bit in terms of some of the education related to that. But you used some wonderful examples in Plugged In Manager. It's obviously a while since that was published. Today we can sort of reel off some of the completely or almost completely virtual organizations like Automatic and TopTal and GitLab and so on. So are these organizations we should study? Is there a lot to learn from these completely virtual organizations, or is it really quite a different dynamic in far more traditional organizations? They just need to edge forward from where they are rather than trying to learn from these completely virtual organizations.
I love the way you pose that. I've never thought about it in terms of, are there things maybe that a face-to-face organization shouldn't do that a fully distributed organization is doing? And I think all organizations can learn from the fully distributed ones. And the one I know the most about is Automatic. And so that the company behind WordPress.org, they've been fully remote, as you know, since the beginning. And I can't think of a single work practice that they use that wouldn't also add value in a more traditional organization. There's a book, I can't say I love the title, called A Year Without Pants, kind of documenting sort of what it's like to work at that company. And yeah, I'm going to say that every single thing they do would have benefit for all of us. The idea that when they do come together, they come together very thoughtfully. They think hard about how they budget their money to support their virtual teams. And to talk to anyone there about, given that they can't have their annual get-together or they can't have their biannual team meetings face-to-face, which is a technique that they've used all along, how they're going to still get that, boost of community that they're used to having. What techniques are they going to draw on, given that they can't come together like they have in the past? Because they've always been fully remote in terms of getting the work done, but they also understood the value of people having some kind of face-to-face interaction. So that's some follow-up I'll need to do.
So one of the other themes of your work is what's sometimes described as the gig economy. And in terms of just the realities, if we're looking at the future of work, more and more is now less structured, not full-time employment, and is looking very much like that's going to continue to be the way. So as an educator, I think you're aware that students are entering this world where some things are not just narrowly sign a job and turn up 9 to 5 for a while, and they have to do things for themselves. So how do you help people, young or old, to understand this world of employment laid open and how to approach that well.
Right. I completely agree that what's likely to happen is more of an open talent economy. And I think I'm using Mary McGovern's words there and describing it as kind of this open talent that we can bring organizations together, not necessarily employing them, not necessarily putting them on a long-term contract, but all the variations in there that could be possible. And what I say to my students is, expect that this is the world you're going to be working in. And so your own professional background becomes, something you really have to function on. Nobody's going to be grooming you like maybe they were decades ago. I think certainly not in the current environment. And so taking that on and understanding that, like we were talking about before, work design is something you're going to have to do for yourself, which has benefits to any organization that you end up working with. If you come in and you actually know how to bring all your skills to bear, perhaps you even bring your own tools with you. That may be something that we start to see in the future. Maybe I bring my desktop assistant that is totally tuned to the way I do my work. And that needs to be something that we can plug in to the organization as they go along. But we talk a lot in class about not only designing your own work, but also managing your own ongoing mosaic of education. So not just the idea that you're going to get a particular degree, but the idea that you're going to have things that maybe have a certificate attached to it, or maybe they don't. It's just a skill set that you need to learn and that you need to be able to bring to bear to different kinds of tasks. So we're all going to be in that more entrepreneurial environment. We teach actually very focused on the idea of gaining an entrepreneurial mindset. So we don't all have to be entrepreneurs, but we do all have to have some aspects of an entrepreneurial mindset, either for how we get our work done, how we find the opportunity to do work. And then if I'm trying to build an organization, maybe I am an entrepreneur, how do I build it without necessarily hiring a bunch of folks? How can I bring open talent to the practices? And, I know I was involved with Hyperloop the last time that we were talking, and the idea that you can build this kind of a company with such a small number of employees by kind of crowd powering your approach. So all of us, I think, should be maybe feeling a little bit freed in terms of the kind of work that we're going to do and how we're going to get that work done. But it's also a heavy responsibility to take on those personal development aspects, for yourself.
Yes, though I think fairly essential that we need to take responsibility. I think Reid Hoffman, can't remember the name of the book, but around the joint responsibilities of individuals and organizations for developing people. But so just going back to what you were just saying around these combining things, I wrote getting results from crowds, and part of that theme then was saying how do you bring that together. But I'd love to hear your insights, saying, all right, well, we've got people inside, we maybe have an open talent of people around the world. We may have retired people who are tapping, as people like P&G do with Your Own Core, and we may have machines, AI being able to do stuff. So how do leaders, how should they be thinking about that? From going from, all right, we've got a lot of people, employees, through to this far more different array of talent and capabilities. How do they combine them?
Yeah, and in some conversations you and I had earlier, I sort of talked about this idea of a portfolio approach, where you can think about a traditional employee, a contractor, freelance folks that might come in shorter terms, crowd members where maybe you even don't know who they are, and then automation of a variety and sort, either just normal automation, things like assembly lines, or things that are more intelligent as we build out that skill set. And you made an excellent point that said, but they really aren't separate. If I think about a portfolio, they do come across as being more distinct, but our skill is about how do we blend those? How do we blend the right pieces such that we get the outcomes that we want. And you're going to be thinking about intellectual property issues as you think about that. You might be thinking about a local community. Maybe you're in a place where you really can draw on localized talent and have that be something that's the focus. And at that point, I step back and I go straight to the thinking in 5T. I'm going to start with my target. I'm going to think about the talent that I either have or I can get access to, and what form does that talent take, and what technologies does that talent bring along with them, or should I be offering up techniques that I'll use to blend it all together, but really taking in mind also the context and the times that we're working for. And understanding, as I mentioned before, that you're going to try things and you need to be tracking how that's working out for you, and just keep trying lightweight experiments. Another book, we could do a great book review off this conversation. Going back to the Lean Startup, or the books that came after that, and thinking about how do I run an experiment around work? So not necessarily an experiment about a new product, new service, but maybe about a new way of working, and test that out. What are the right techniques for that? What's the right timeline? And I guess the only other thing I'd want to add is, if the organization isn't there to kind of be our backstop, if we are going to be more members of this open talent community, then we still need some kind of a professional home. And the idea of guilds has always resonated with me, that I could be a member of a guild, and depending on where you live in the world, maybe the guild is also going to be support for your benefits packages, or maybe your government is. But maybe the guild is the professional place where I get to learn my craft. I get to model off other people's successes. I get to share my successes, but that I still have a home, even though that home might not be expected to be, say, lifetime employment with IBM if I, look back decades.
So the core theme here is education. You're an educator, amongst other things. And, you made the point before that, we all need lifelong learning. And so perhaps not addressing the future of higher education right now, but this idea of saying, all right, well, how do we get education to be embedded in organizations? And I suppose that education is partly discovery, as we've been talking about, in how do you do, not become more virtualized, but be an effective organization in a different world. And that's for, of course, the leaders. It is, of course, for the managers. It is, of course, for all of the people inside the organization. So how can we bring that education, and particularly around essentially how to be better at creating organizational value? What can we be doing to help organizations and individuals with that?
Yeah, I think I can just look to see what is working effectively and kind of launch from that point, that we're taking smaller bites. And we haven't seen a huge shift in that yet with high schools, or so sort of grades 9 through 12, or university undergraduate degrees. We haven't so much seen that smaller bite, but I hope we start to. And we have, though, at graduate education, seen smaller bites, and even in professional development work that most universities and certainly most business schools also contribute to, that we try and offer education that's going to be valuable immediately. And I think we're getting better at that. We're certainly learning how to partner better with organizations, which, kind of begs the question, well, if it's an open talent economy, then you're not really tying together with an organization necessarily, but I might leave that one for the moment. But the idea that smaller nuggets of education are available to us, YouTube being, maybe the most amazing place we can go for some of this. I wonder what's going to happen. Well, what would Twitch be like if it were watching someone work? Would there be benefit there? It's the one I kind of go back to when I'm out on a walk from time to time. But going to smaller bites, going to moments when it's going to have value immediately in the organization. Seeing stronger partnerships between either the organization that needs some new skill set to be available to its employees, or finding ways to support that open talent network. So maybe if then guilds become something that are happening, maybe we start to partner with guilds to offer up some of those things, and maybe disintermediating the education from the assessment is something we also might be thinking about. I would almost rather that my job be, how do I offer up a capability to someone? How do I help coach them towards that capability? But then the organization itself maybe gives them the grade, right? So they know that real world outcome that they need, and that assessment. And I don't want to teach to the test. I want to offer up a capability to somebody who needs it, and then let that assessment maybe go to someplace else.
I think that's really insightful and very important. So that inevitably points to where we're going on a lot of this, where we just need to get some more momentum in that direction.
Yeah.
So I suppose pulling together, I mean, is there any other, I suppose this theme of the very dangerous phrase of virtual excellence that you would point to in terms of what leaders or any of us should be doing or could be doing now in terms of being able to develop their capabilities at being effective in an increasingly virtual world?
Mm-hmm. I think I'll go at it from two directions, perhaps. And the first is this idea that there's so much value from the bottom up. Research shows us that without training, people are really kind of terrible work designers. If you have training, if you're, a HR specialist who's focused in that area, then you're good at it because that's your job. But just randomly, people aren't, for whatever reason, good at it. If you ask someone to redesign work, they tend to redesign something that's pretty robotic, which is probably not the way they want to do the work, but they end up designing the work in that way when you ask them to. And so giving people the understanding that they do need to be doing work design from the bottom up, that it's not just going to be handed down. But if that's the case, learn how to do it well and learn how to design work that is engaging and enriching and that will give you opportunities for the future. Don't just design something robotic. You design something robotic, a robot's going to replace you because it's always going to be a cheaper approach, or generally a cheaper approach. So that bottom-up idea, I think, is a big piece. And this acknowledgement that this will be an ongoing set of adjustments, and we have to be okay with that. But there's a lot of value to be gained by watching the people who are most effective. I think the idea that you are offering up a show where people get to talk through the examples that they've seen, and that's going to be how a lot of education happens, is exactly through the kinds of things you're doing. I'll be using the videos in my courses and pointing. I think will be most valuable to them at that very moment, and understanding we've got to look around and learn from others, and try things that they've been doing. It's a time for people who really do like to learn and extend themselves. Probably not a great moment in people's lives for ones who favor stability, and that's just part of our times, right? That fifth T.
Yes. It's comfort with ambiguity is a kind of a necessary trait these days. Otherwise, you're not going to be very happy.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with guests on the Virtual Excellence Show, Terri. It's fantastic to catch up. Fantastic to get your insights. You've obviously built further on the fantastic foundations you had earlier in really being I suppose seeing the issues that are highly relevant today. And just, I suppose, is there anything in particular you're doing? Do you have any other books coming up, or are there any other resources that you'd point to that you can share that the viewers can access?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. I've been mostly just putting up blog posts at terrigriffith.com. And in the past, I blogged to the book. And so basically you're getting to see all those ideas first, and hopefully through comments kind of mold the ideas in ways that other people can find valuable. I like the idea of a bottom-up shared approach. So as people help. And I haven't gone to another book yet, largely because I'm not certain that's where people are getting the most valuable education. And, yes, formally, I'm a professor at Simon Fraser, but I think all of the things that we're doing are educational. And I really want to find the fastest way to support people. So if people in your comments, should a book be the next thing? I would love to learn from the audience about that one. Otherwise, having the opportunity to have conversations like this is, I think, a little bit more of the moment, and maybe that's more valuable.
Yeah, well, it certainly has been an extraordinarily valuable conversation. So thank you so much for your time and your insights, Terri. We'll speak again later.
All right. Take care, Ross. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So that was the wonderful Terri Griffith sharing her deep insights into connected world, connected organizations, connected people, and what we should do. So please subscribe on YouTube, like the video if you feel so inclined. That's very much help us as we grow, as we go. And do go to the website, thevx.show. We're going to be building a whole set of resources there in additional. So thank you so much for being part of the show. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.